Okay, so I've been working on a top 25 list, both for the top 25 hitters in baseball and the top 25 pitchers. Now, because I'm dividing it into the top 25 hitters and pitchers, obviously Shohei Ohtani is a little bit of an interesting case because he's both. So I did not have Shohei Ohtani on my top 25 hitters in baseball. And I approached JM about this last week, asking him what he thought of my list. And he said I was crazy for not having him in the top 25. JM, I would love to hear some of your reasoning.
Well, first of all, why don't you tell everybody where you had Yordan Alvarez on the list?
I don't remember the exact placement, and I want to reveal the list on TikTok, but it was high. It
was like top 5. It was very high.
Sure. Yeah.
So as he should, though.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
He definitely should be there. But that is my point. The reason why I bring that up is Joe was saying, well, Ohtani doesn't play the field. He's just a DH, everything like that. Yordan Alvarez is a DH, and I know he obviously just had a fantastic season, probably the most offensive, productive season we've seen out of an American League hitter besides Aaron Judge last year. My reasoning is Shohei Ohtani is a guy who has had over a 900 OPS combined in the last 2 seasons. He's hit 80 home runs. He's also a threat to steal bases. And something really interesting that I want to bring up. His baseball savant page. You go look at his baseball savant page. You look at how great of a raw hitter he is. His percentile rankings. He's 97th, and this is among the Major League Baseball. 97th in average exit velocity. 100th in max exit velocity. 93rd hard hit percentage. 98th xWOBA. 92nd expected batting average. 99th expected slugging. 98th barrel percentage. The guy just hits the living crap out of the ball. And to me, I don't understand how you don't have him on your top 25 hitters list. I might have him in my top 15, maybe top 10.
I didn't know about the baseball savant page. That's definitely eye-opening. I'm looking at what James just said. I don't think 80 home runs past 2 seasons. His OPS plus is 157 in 2021, 145 in 2022. I don't understand this at all. And I need to hear your reasoning. I don't even know
so I'll give you my reasoning. So when I was making this list, I started from 1, and I put Aaron. I mean, this is a spoiler, but I mean, it's obvious. I had Aaron Judge at 1, and then I was kind of working my way down. And as I was working my way down, I was like dead set on putting Ohtani in the top 25. But as I kept going down the list, I would look at these other guys, and I would see the value that they're bringing as a hitter and as a defender, because I'm not just ranking the value they bring offensively, I'm ranking them as position players, right? To touch on Yordan Alvarez and my reasoning there, Yordan Alvarez is the second best offensive player in baseball behind Aaron Judge, at least if we base it off of last year. Yordan Alvarez, despite playing mostly DH, he did play about 50 games in the outfield. Hang on 1 second, I got to pop up on my screen. It's distracting me. Despite he did wind up playing about 50 games in the outfield, and believe it or not, he's actually not as horrible of a defender as you might think. He ended up putting up 5 defensive runs saved. He did have -5 outs above average, but
yeah, I think I could put up 5 defensive runs saved playing left field in Minute Maid Park. But
sure, but that's a fair point. But I mean, he is still playing in road ballparks sometimes, and they do take into account the park you're playing into with these statistics. So he does provide some value defensively. Now, when I was going through the statistics as I was making this list, Shohei Ohtani was 42nd last year amongst hitters in WAR. And that's just amongst hitters. If you come, I think that when we think of Shohei Ohtani as we should, we think of him as, this unicorn. He's a pitcher and a hitter. And don't get me wrong, if I'm going to combine the 2 lists and rank the top players in baseball, I would probably have Ohtani second. At least. You could even make the argument for him to be 1 just because he's a top 7 pitcher in baseball at least. And then he's a top, whatever it is, 30 hitter. And just the fact that he provides value on both sides of the ball like that is what makes him so special. But, I go down this list, like, I'll throw some names at you, okay, that I had on the list. And you tell me, picture it this way. You could have Shohei Ohtani on your team, but he's not going to pitch. He is your everyday DH, okay? But these other guys, obviously, if I throw a shortstop at you, they're going to be your shortstop and they're going to provide all the value there and whatever. Okay. So I'll throw some other names that I had on my list at you, and you tell me whether or not you'd rather have Ohtani or them. Let me pull up the list quick because I know I have it right here. Okay. Okay. Francisco Lindor.
Ohtani.
All right, we're off to a great start. Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah, Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah, but
how do you even have to think about that? I don't understand that.
I would go Rodriguez. Yeah, I would go Rodriguez, but it's very close.
I don't know. How is it? What makes that close?
How are you this is the part that I'm not understanding at all. How are you sitting here saying Yordan Alvarez is a top 5 hitter in baseball? To me, I don't view like Yordan Alvarez and Shohei Ohtani. Like, it's like pretty close as
it's
hitters.
Really not that close.
Joe, the guy hit 46 home runs in 2021. Last year, he had a down year offensively, hit 34, steals bags, still had a really good OPS. He's got over a 900 OPS the last 2 seasons. He's hitting the crap out of the ball. You're the one who wants to, you talk about luck. I'm sure he had some bad luck last year if he's barrel percentage and hard hit rate and all this stuff are through the roof and his offensive numbers were down last year. I don't get where you're coming from with saying he's not a top 25 hitter in baseball.
Joe, if they threw this guy in right field and, he was an average defender, would it
think that way, though? That's my point.
No, but his WAR numbers would be better because Yordan Alvarez, I would take 90% of the league to play left field over Yordan Alvarez, but I'm sure he gets some decent WAR numbers added on because he occasionally plays the field.
Like, when you're this good of a hitter, I don't care what you're doing on defense or if you play defense.
You have to take the hypotheticals out of it, though. I'm not sure. If you told me, I'm sure he would be. Apparently, he was a pretty good defender when he was overseas. So, yeah, if you could, that would absolutely change my perspective if you said you could also put him in the outfield. But I'm just talking about real life. He is a DH, okay? When I look at, I threw out the name Francisco Lindor, and Francisco Lindor is one of, if not the best defensive players in all of baseball. And then he also is a well above average hitter for his position. Francisco Lindor was 6th in WAR last year. Francisco Lindor is a superstar. And I look at the value that he's bringing to the team. I mean, if we just compare the numbers directly, and again, I know WAR is not everything, but he was 6th in WAR. He had a 6.8 WAR. And then Ohtani was 42nd. And I just don't. And then Julio Rodriguez, to me, the fact that was even a thought is crazy to me.
Hold on, Joe. Let's go back to Francisco Lindor. I'm the biggest Met fan. I love Francisco Lindor. I look at these two players. Who am I paying? And he's just a hitter. He's not even, Ohtani's not even a pitcher. He could be the freaking DH. If I had to give $341 million to one player, I would give it to the DH.
That's wild.
Shohei Ohtani.
I don't understand that at all. It's
the offensive production is so
huge.
huge.
But do you want? I
completely understand what you're saying. Completely. Lindor is remarkable at shortstop. I watch him every night. He's remarkable.
I think this is like a really weird and kind of stupid argument to have where you say, ignore everything Shohei Ohtani does as a pitcher. Just look at him like a DH. And then the reasoning why I'm going to tell you that Francisco Lindor is a better, I don't even want to say hitter because it just makes you think about offense, but
just like position player.
A better position player than Shohei Ohtani. The main reasoning I'm going to give you is because what he does on the defensive side of the ball.
It's not the main reason. I mean, Francisco Lindor is still a great hitter too. I mean, right. Merlo, you were just talking about the difference between these two players. Francisco Lindor had a 127 WRC plus last year. Ohtani was at 142. So you're telling me that 25-point difference in WRC plus is way more important to you than the Gold Glove caliber defense that Lindor is bringing to the table at probably the most important defensive position on the field.
I'm gonna lose this argument because we're going off of last season and not his MVP season, and JM's probably right with the luck that he had last year, but
I can tell. I mean, I have the answer for you right now with the luck. I mean, he was slightly unlucky last year. His expected WOBA was 15 points higher than his actual WOBA. So he did have slightly worse results than his batted ball data will tell you. And I'm sure even the shift, getting rid of the shift is going to help Ohtani. It's going to help a lot of hitters. I feel like we'd say that for everybody. But again, it's such a unique. I agree with JM that it's a unique argument to have because from my perspective, when I'm making this list, I'm saying, okay, I have Paul Goldschmidt in X spot. How can I, where I'm putting Ohtani then, obviously overall Ohtani is a better player than Goldschmidt because of the pitching, but it's unfair for me to on this list now say, well, I'm going to put Ohtani, fifth or whatever on this list because of the pitching, but then also when I make my pitchers list, put him in my top 7 or top 5 or whatever it is. I have to just look at him as a position player. And
it's unfair though, he's not playing a position. He's a designated hitter.
He's a DH. I mean, he's a DH 4 out of 5 days. So, and then even on, when he pitches, he's still a DH. So it really is like 2 different players. And again, if we're going to combine both, I think that he's a top 3. He might be the best player in baseball.
He's probably the best. He's the best player in baseball.
Yeah. I mean, Judge had a better year than him last year, but, you could absolutely make the argument if you consider the last 2 years that he is the best player. If you take into account the last 2 years, he is the best player in baseball. And you could also say moving forward, he's the best player. I'm not disagreeing with that. I just, again, like if given the scenario that I gave you and the scenario that I used making this list of he is just your DH. Let's say he, it was like a couple years ago, he was hurt, he couldn't pitch, and he was just hitting. He could only hit for you, right? He's just Shohei Ohtani's your DH. I don't see how him versus Julio Rodriguez is even close. And then Lindor to me is like also a no-brainer. I think Lindor, there are, again, I'll go through more guys in this list. You guys tell me what you think. Like Jose Ramirez.
Okay, yeah, Jose, I'd take Jose.
I like Jose Ramirez. I'd go Jose Ramirez.
Okay, so I mean, some of these guys I would think would be kind of. I mean, JM said he might put him in my top 10. Jose Ramirez is not my top 10. I'll just say that right now.
Where's Rafael Devers on this list?
Rafael Devers is on this list.
Yeah, that one's close too. I'd probably go.
What about like Kyle Tucker?
No, I'm going Shohei.
I don't understand because Kyle Tucker, he's bringing.
Kyle Tucker's great.
Yeah, exactly. But if you just looked at it from this perspective, Kyle Tucker is like a little worse than Shohei offensively, right? And he's another guy that
it's not a little. I think that's the thing. I think you're going too recency bias here because obviously the fact that the guy pitches 30 starts, he's going to have some fluctuating stats. Like last year, he was a better pitcher than he was a hitter. He was still a great hitter last year. And in 2021, he was the best hitter in baseball, basically.
And Joe, are these?
He wasn't the best hitter in baseball in 2021.
It was right behind. It was very close to being the best hitter in baseball. I just looked at the stats. He had 46 home runs. His offensive rating on Fangraphs was 5th in the major leagues. He was fantastic.
Who was the best hitter in baseball in 2021?
You could say either Soto, Harper, Tatis,
Vlad.
Okay,
Guerrero Jr.
Can I ask you a question? Is this like when you're looking at like the value, you're looking at just WAR, correct? Because you're saying it's not all WAR.
Statistics. I use other statistics to take into account a player's value. But my point with using WAR is just that I'm also taking into account their defense. So like I'm looking at Shohei Ohtani as a DH, just like I'm looking at Yordan Alvarez or Giancarlo. I mean, not that Giancarlo Stanton wasn't on my list, but like just like their DHs.
But you're saying you're not just using WAR, but when it comes to Ohtani, you're only using I'm
not only using. So I'll put it to you this way. So Shohei Ohtani was, I believe he was 17th in baseball last year in WRC plus. Okay, so according to that, he was the 17th best just hitter. But then when I take into account some of the guys that were behind him, and then I look at somebody like a Francisco Lindor or a Kyle Tucker,
why can we stop only focusing on last year? He had a down year, and he was still 17th in baseball in WRC plus.
Okay, I'm
looking at this right now. A batting statistic, win probability added. Yordan Alvarez 6.5 from 2021 to 2022. Shohei Ohtani 7.3 2021 to 2022. And you have Yordan Alvarez 5th.
But I don't. But
whatever you have him.
But again, I mean, Alvarez really, became a monster. That's not the best example because he became a monster last year. He took a huge leap forward with his offense. And then the part of the criteria for this list was also projecting moving forward. So Alvarez projecting moving forward, he might be the best offensive player in baseball next year, just hitting wise.
Really might be. Holy
Exactly.
crap. I'm looking at his numbers.
Yeah, no, his
He's
numbers,
ridiculous.
it's like hilarious. Okay, so if you want to combine, what's the time frame you're looking at? Because when they do it on MLB Network or whatever, they talk about the last 3 years and then scaling it backwards of importance. Obviously, the most recent, how much they weigh each year.
Yeah, I mean, they literally use. I mean, MLB Network uses like the shredder, and I mean, they come out with these horrible lists every year because the way that they weigh it and like this formula or algorithm, whatever you want to call it, that they use, and then they also project moving forward. The way that it's weighted is ridiculous to me, and that's why everybody hates those lists, including myself. And I know the two of you have been critical of them as well. To me, I wasn't looking at so formulaic. Like I wasn't like, oh, okay, well, like I have to look at the last 3 years, but then like last year's weighted the most because you have guys that broke out last season. So like for example, like a guy that barely made my list, I'll have a spoiler right now. Number 25 on my list is Andres Jimenez. And if we look at what are you throwing your hands up for?
Andres Jimenez, a better hitter than Shohei Ohtani. He just had a career year out of nowhere.
He's 24 years old. He had a breakout season.
Shohei Ohtani's 28.
What?
Shohei Ohtani is 28 years old.
Yeah,
I don't care about age.
No, but I'm not. No, wait. But you're missing the point with this. Andres Jimenez, I can't say let me weigh the last 3 seasons because he's a young player that just broke out last year. So I'm not going to knock him for being bad or average the 2 seasons before that because all of a sudden he was a top 3 defensive player in baseball last year and he was great with the bat. So that's why I had him 25th. He provided more value than Ohtani did last year. And I'm projecting moving forward, he could get even better.
Let's not use the word great with the bat for Andres Jimenez. He was good with the bat, well above average. He was not great. Shohei Ohtani's been great. Elite. Shohei Ohtani's been elite with the bat.
What do you consider elite? Because he has not been. He has not been. He was 20th in WAR amongst hitters in 2021. Which was a better season for him, but he wasn't in that top tier.
But is that because he's not playing defense?
I said this is why your argument's flawed.
Absolutely.
I just said with the bat, and you hit me with WAR, which is a stat that uses defense.
I don't care about defense right now.
But I keep using the term with the bat because I'm trying to make it clear that we're talking about just position players, and I'm not factoring in his pitching at all. Him being the DH and taking up that spot every single year contributes to a negative to his WAR because he's just occupying a spot that provides no defensive value, and also the Angels can't rest anybody in that spot because he's taking the DH spot. That's why I'm a big advocate for the Yankees would stand. Like he shouldn't be DHing every single day because it hurts the rest of your roster. There's a reason they get to these numbers for a reason. So Ohtani providing value as just a position player to me is not top 25. Trust me, I was going back and forth between 10 guys for the last 5 spots, and he was right there. But there were just guys, again, like some of the guys I named that I couldn't, I can't put him above Jose Altuve as just a position player.
Okay, I'm going to keep comparing him to Yordan Alvarez because it's the only guy I can really compare it to on this list because he's another DH. Again, looking at the last 2 seasons, their statistics are extremely similar.
Shohei Ohtani's got seasons with Alvarez though, because he broke out this. He had it. What is forward this year?
What does it matter, Joe? Vlad Guerrero Jr. in 2021 broke out, had an insane year, and then last year had a season that was good, but not something that we expected him to have, an OPS under 900. So it's literally this is why I think it's just a little bit of recency bias because Ohtani, you just flip his seasons, and that's the way Alvarez has gone. 2021 was good, was above average for Alvarez, and then 2022 was insane.
Okay, so again,
hold on, let me finish. I want to read you these stats I was about to read you. So slash line, Ohtani 265, 364, 554. That's over the last 2 seasons. Alvarez 291, 375, 569. Alvarez's OPS is 944. Ohtani's is 918. OPS plus Ohtani 151, Alvarez 159. To me, I don't understand how you can look at those numbers and then you factor in the fact that Ohtani is a faster player, has stolen almost 40 bags in the last 2 seasons, which provides some value. I don't understand how you could sit here and say Yordan Alvarez is no doubt top 5 on your list, and Shohei Ohtani is not a top 25 hitter in baseball.
I wish there was a way that in this argument for me and JM that we could take his fielding stats as a pitcher and add it to
That's what I was thinking. I'm not even joking. I was thinking about bringing that up before. He does play defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, every 5th day as a pitcher, which is, the least valuable defensive position when the ball is in play.
I'm sure if there was a way to take that value and just add a little bit to his.
Well, but they don't ignore that. When these value statistics are like when WAR is calculated, like they don't just ignore the fact that he is playing defense as a pitcher. That is factored into it. They know that he's not just a DH on that day. That is factored into it.
Do they break it down how they get the number? Like, is it 0.8%? Is it 0.8 of his 9?
I'm not sure. I'm sure it's just whenever he's out on the field, it's accounted, whatever percentage it is, it's accounted to the stat. I also just want to throw out there that I actually did not. Alvarez is not my top 5. I might have said that before and misspoke. He is in my top 10. He's towards the bottom of my top 10, but he's not in my top 5. But again, like JM, you brought up the point of like if you could just flip those 2 seasons, you can't really just do that because like tell me this, like next year, knowing that Alvarez just had this monster season. Next year, wouldn't you much rather have Yordan Alvarez as your DH than Ohtani?
Yes, but I wouldn't much rather have him. I would rather have him, but it's not like that far off.
That's like easy because Alvarez, like I said, he is the second best offensive player in baseball. Just offense, just producing as a hitter.
Joe, I don't understand your whole projection system here because I think you're just like getting too wrapped up in the numbers. Like, I didn't think Aaron Judge was going to hit 62 home runs and have 11 WAR last year. No. I would have never projected that. So I actually am going to say I think Yordan Alvarez is going to regress next year. I don't think he's going to have the same kind of season that he did this past year.
And I think Ohtani's going to have a better season.
Exactly.
But why would you? Okay, but Ohtani, I feel like Ohtani, if anything, like, it's not like he just came into the league 2 years ago. He was in the league, and he has had, like, below-average offense.
Same thing Yordan Alvarez.
Right, but Alvarez is a young player who just broke out. And
he didn't have a below-average season either.
He didn't just break out, Joe. He almost won the AL Rookie of the Year. What do you
He did win the Rookie of the Year.
He did win the Rookie of the Year.
He was incredible his rookie season. Absolutely. And then this year was, like, really the year that, like, he was mostly healthy. He came into his own and became like that dominant offensive force because for a while he was like a little disappointing for a couple of seasons. And then he broke out significantly this year to a level that he had never been at before.
He wasn't as good as he was in his rookie year in 2021. I'm throwing out 2022. He played 2 games. I'm sorry. I'm throwing out 2020. He only played 2 games. 2021, yes, was not as good as his rookie season. And then he had the amazing year that you expected this season in 135 games. But like again, what JM was saying, it's the same thing, just flipped for Ohtani.
Okay, but like you guys are acting like Ohtani. It's like he had this down year, and like you expect him to bounce back and like be be a top 10 hitter in baseball next year or whatever. Like Ohtani, I think he's kind of shown. I think these last 2 seasons is his ceiling. He's shown us that this is his ceiling as a hitter.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Sure, and don't get me wrong, his ceiling is great. I'm not saying that, he has to get better as a hitter, but his ceiling is still not a top 25 hitter and position player in baseball, just from like a value perspective.
Yes, it is. You're telling me, so that you basically just said in 2021 he wasn't a top 25 hitter in baseball.
No, in 2021 he was the 20th, according to WAR, he was the 20th best position player. Last year he was 42nd, right? So then if I take into account all these other players that broke out last year or what have you and project forward, I can't just easily say like, I don't understand how you arrive at the number that he's like top 15 or top 10 because he's never even been that.
Can I actually?
But no, this is the problem. You're using WAR as like the be all end all stat by saying he was the 20th. He was 20th, so that's it. He's 20th. That's an advanced statistic. Then you want to look at the standard statistics. He's way better than 20th. Also,
just hitting.
I think, like we were talking about before, I think Yordan Alvarez is going to regress a little this season, just like how I'm not expecting Aaron Judge to hit 62 home runs again next year. I think his numbers will come back down to earth a little bit. And also, let's not act like Yordan Alvarez had this like Aaron Judge-esque season last year. He had a very nice season, was cut short a little bit due to injury. Only hit 37 home runs. His OPS wasn't in the 1100s where we're seeing like, holy crap, he's like Barry Bonds number. Like we're
He's
treating
over 1,000.
we're
I mean, he had
treating
a
you on
180. He had a 185
he had a
WRC
great
plus.
season. You know who also did the same thing? JD Martinez had an OPS in the thousands as a DH, and then he came back down to earth. I know
This
it's
guy's
different with the
25
age.
years. He's
Yeah,
25 years old.
I know it's different with the age, but I'm just saying this is what happens. The guys fluctuate. My whole point of the argument, my two major points are, I think you're way too much with the recency bias, and I just don't think you realize how great of a hitter Shohei Ohtani is.
And
Okay,
I think he played. Alvarez played 56 games in the outfield last year compared to the 135 he played, total games. So yes, that's going to add value to himself, but he did not play more than half of his games. He was more than half of the games he played as a designated hitter, and he's in the top 10 on your list. And Ohtani, who pitches every fifth day, and for 4 days a week, he is the designated hitter, he's being punished.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, Fangraphs is going to punish Ohtani for DHing just as much as Alvarez. And again, like, I feel like you're just like JM, you're kind of just like throwing this Alvarez season like to the side, like, oh, who knows if he'll.
Because you're throwing Ohtani season to the side.
No, I'm not
Joe,
throwing
I'm
it
not.
to the side. No, I'm saying JM is.
He is unreal.
Like, he's not like, if anything, Alvarez, I think he actually, believe it or not, his ex-WOBA was 0.01 lower than Judge's. If anything, he had some batted ball luck that wasn't great last year. His actual WOBA was.
Well, yeah, sorry, but that's not how it works. I don't mean to like call you out, but you said the same thing with Nolan Arenado. Like, that's not the way the numbers work, where it's, next season he's going to be less unlucky or whatever.
I agree, but there's also no reason to say that he's going to regress. I don't see why he would regress. It's possible. I mean, anything is possible in baseball, especially. I mean, if there was a perfect projection system, then, a lot of people's jobs would be a lot easier, and making these lists would be a lot easier. But again, it's very close. I'm not saying that you guys are crazy for having him in your top 25 or anything like that, but I do think top 10 or 15, especially 10, is stretched.
I have to look at the list. The top, it's probably not 10, but I need to look at the list.
I think you're crazy not having him in the top 25.
Yeah,
like I would. I'm gonna look at the list and I'm gonna say, okay, I'll look at it from your perspective, but there are gonna be like Andres Gimenez. Like, I know he's a great defender, but I can't. I
will say that last spot, that Andres Gimenez spot, I went back and forth between, like I said, it was probably 10 players, and Ohtani was one of them. I know, like, off the top of my head, like Marcus Semien was one of them. Corey Seager was one of them.
That's another thing with. I understand. I have a very good understanding of how WAR works and these advanced statistics in baseball, how they work. Think about trying to explain this to somebody, saying, okay, I'm going to compare Andres Gimenez and Shohei Ohtani. So, who would you rather have? A guy who is an excellent defender, but plays one of the least important defensive positions in baseball, and is a above average hitter, but not elite? Or would you rather have a guy who is only going to play offense, but he is an elite hitter? He leads the MLB, or is up there the MLB in home runs over the last 2 seasons. I'm going to take the second guy.
Joe, may I ask
it that way.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
About a player on the list. Is Jeff McNeil on this list?
He was a guy that was I was very close to putting him on the list, but he is not on the list. He was an honorable mention. And so 2 Mets were actually. He was, and so was Brandon Nimmo. Both of those guys were very close. Like I said, there were a lot of honorable like there. I off the top of my head too, I could tell you like Tommy Edman was an honorable mention, but he's just what I can't justify putting Edman over like Shohei Ohtani. I mean, he's great defensively, but the bat leaves a little bit to be desired. I know, like, Bo Bichette, I like briefly considered, but he's just not a good defensive shortstop.
See, okay, that's where I think the whole WAR argument makes no sense. Is you can't treat it, and I know you've presented other statistics besides WAR, but you can't treat it as such an important statistic And then when a guy like Tommy Edman has a really high WAR, but his offensive numbers suck, and you're like, well, that's kind of a bad look for WAR, you just like push it to the side. You know what I mean? Like,
I know. Well, I could tell
treat
you
it
why.
like, go ahead.
I can tell you why. So, like, a big reason why Tommy Edman, or the reason why Tommy Edman was, I believe he was what? Like, he was 17th in FWAR last year amongst position players. The reason he was there was because of his defense and his base running. Guys projecting moving forward, if Tommy Edman, even if he is consistently like a top 5 defensive shortstop in the league, he's not going to be on the WAR leaderboards every single year just because of his defense. Like, defense fluctuates too much season to season, even for the great guys, for me to say, oh, okay, well, he's not great offensively, but he is great defensively. And like I said, I still did even like briefly consider him, and he still is an honorable mention for me. But to me, I do still think, don't get me wrong, that hitting is more valuable than defense for position players. I'm not going to say that they have equal value, but also on the same side of that coin, I don't have a lot of guys on this list that are like bad defenders. I don't really have anybody that's a bad defender.
Yeah, but defense might fluctuate for the player season by season, but it's not fluctuating for the statistic. You know what I mean? Like, if you have very good defense, your WAR is going to be very high. It's not like Tommy Edman's WAR will stay the same even though his defense was a little worse the next season. My point was, how could you use that statistic and a guy is having a really good defensive season but his offensive numbers don't match up with it, and then you're just like, oh, we'll just ignore the WAR for him because
I'm not ignoring
it looks
WAR
dumb.
for him. I'm not ignoring WAR for him. A big part of my list, I mean, if I was just making this list based off of last year, he would be in the top 25 because his defense was so valuable. But projecting moving forward, considering the bat leaves a lot to be desired, and the fact that the defense probably won't be at the point where it was last year, like Carlos Correa is a good example. Carlos Correa was the best defensive shortstop in the league in 2021, and he had a super high WAR because of it, and obviously he's a great hitter too. Last season, it dipped. His defensive statistics were actually not that great last year, and it led to his WAR being lower. But he still provides all that value with the bat, which is why, like, Carlos Correa made my list. And we know how good Carlos Correa is.